This last weekend in Portugal, we had our sixth different winner in 6 consecutive MotoGP Grand Prix. But does that mean that we've really achieved parity? Welcome back to another edition of Monday Morning MotoGP, and we are talking about Portugal, the penultimate round of the 2025 MotoGP season. But before we dig into all that and everything that happened, if you could please like, follow, share, subscribe, mash all those buttons so you get all the MotoGP content you can possibly imagine. And fun little fact, I basically respond to every single comment, so come talk some MotoGP with me. Now, we have a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about Bez's big win. We're going to talk about some unexpected results further down the line. We're going to talk about a Superbike Superman, and we are going to be talking about Aero in MotoGP. But first, I have a little bit of a personal announcement. We know the MotoGP season is winding down, so what on earth am I going to do in the off-season? Well, I've been working on something special, and it is called Throttle Sauce. This is basically modern motorbike media. We're bringing it into the video age, giving you everything from MotoGP, Moto America, World Superbike. We're going to be going on adventures, doing crazy things on and off the bikes, on the roads, on the tracks. I'm teaming up with Dustin from Track Days and Mark from the Scouts Out YouTube channel. You can check them both out on YouTube and all the social media platforms, as well as follow us on Throttle Sauce, at Throttle Sauce, and check us out when we launch the brand new throttlesauce.com this next week. So keep an eye out for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're already been filming all sorts of stuff for you guys, and we're just going to try to blow this thing up as big as we can. The whole point of me starting Horsepower Radio to begin with was to bring MotoGP to the North American audience, to let you know that if you're into motorcycle racing and you're an American, or you're on the North American content, you're not alone. There's some weird gearheads like me out there who want to talk to you about MotoGP and motorcycle racing in general. And that's what Throttle Sauce is all about as well. So enough self-promotion. Go ahead and like, follow, share all those pages as well, and then you'll see what we're doing. But let's jump into the MotoGP, into the Portugal. Enough of that nonsense. So first of all, big win for Marco Bezzecchi and Aprilia. We knew they would be strong at this circuit. It's very fast, it's flowy, it's undulating, it's everything the Aprilia likes. That massive right-hand corner going into the final straight. I mean, all the corner speed you could want. Really good track for Aprilia. We saw Bez fall a little bit short at the Saturday sprint, but on Sunday he was on it from the very beginning. Gets the whole shot, never looks back. Was never really challenged by Alex Marquez or Pedro Acosta behind him. Congratulations to Bez and Aprilia. They are really looking like they are going into 2026 at the sharp end. I mean, the bosses are kind of laying low, playing it as well. You know, you never know. We got to see what happens in the winter testing development. But you can tell their swagger at the Aprilia garage is just different. And if they can get a healthy Jorge Martin next to Marco Bezzecchi, they've got a race winner in Ralph Fernandez, they've got Iogura, they've got a team that can really compete next year. And I think they're expecting internally, look, if we have a good winter, we're going to be right there with Ducati, with all the rest of them competing for the world title as a team, as a constructor, and for the Rider Championship. Make no bones about it. But let's talk a little bit about Pedro Acosta, because we kind of know what we have with Alex Marquez. Runner-up this year in the MotoGP World Championship, has had a phenomenal season, has rode extremely well, deserves all the credit in the world. Pedro Acosta does as well, because he is riding the bolts off that KTM. Top KTM now every week, basically, since the summer break. We saw him struggle in the beginning of the season. He was kind of a little bit of a grumpy Gus, wasn't the easiest guy to be around in the paddock. And then they brought some upgrades, they made some changes, he adapted his style, and he has been far and away KTM's flag bearer for the entire season since then. I mean, Brad Binder has had his moments. Not a bad result this weekend, we'll talk about it, but Pedro has been podium bound almost every single week. I mean, like clockwork, you can set your watch to it. This kid is going to be on the podium. Yes, he's still hunting for that first win. When you call yourself or have the media call you the next Marc Marquez, that's the kind of pressure we look at him with, saying, well, he hasn't won yet. But that KTM is coming forward, and he's the one that is dragging it along. I think the commentators maybe are sick of saying it. They don't really want to, stick the knife into KTM that much, saying, well, Pedro was really outriding your bike, much like Fabio Quartararo outrides that Yamaha. Pedro is bringing that KTM forward, and they need to give him a bike that can really compete, because even they know, again, much like Yamaha, these are two riders who are going to be highly sought after in the silly season next year. These guys are going to be the top signees of someone like Honda, not really Aprilia, but you could see Ducati or somebody like that looking at these guys going, hey, maybe we want to bring one of them over and give them a shot. And for sure, Honda will be looking at one of these guys next season. So both KTM and Yamaha, but we'll stay on the KTM, really need to put a bike under Pedro Acosta that can help him fight for wins. We saw him fight for top 10s, then top 6s. Now it's podiums. This is progress in MotoGP. This is what it looks like. They now need to get over that final hump and join Aprilia in their fight against Ducati. But congratulations to Pedro again on the podium, Alex Marquez again, amazing weekend, and Marco Bezzecchi on the big Sunday win. We've seen him be so successful in the sprints. We've seen him on the podium. Really great to see him win. And it is our 6th different winner in the last 6 Grand Prix. I mean, let me see if I can name them all. We had Marc Marquez, Pecco Bagnaia, and then we had Fermin Aldeguer, Raul Fernandez, then we had Alex Marquez, and now Marco Bezzecchi. But does that really mean that MotoGP has achieved what we call parity? That means it's even across the board, that everything is so tight that you never know who's going to come out on top? No, it does not, because Marc Marquez is not there. And that is the shadow cast on this last part of the season. No matter how good the racing has been and how good Pedro Acosta and Alex Marquez and Marco Bezzecchi and all these people have been, we're always going to ask, well, what if Marc would have been there too? That's what we're going to... You can't help but ask that question. And it begs a question for me of, I think we have to ask ourselves, is Marc Marquez the only alien currently in the MotoGP paddock? You can make an argument for Pedro Acosta that Pedro's an alien. He just doesn't quite have the bike to get race wins. Looking at him versus the other KTMs, far and above. You can make the case that Fabio Quartararo is an alien, but doesn't have the bike. Doesn't have the bike that can do alien things. Marc Marquez is an alien 100%, but also has the bike to do it on. We saw him at Honda even when the Honda was wretched. I mean, the rest of his teammates over at Honda finishing 18th, 19th, 20th, and this guy was still competing for podiums and wrecking his body in the process. I think you could even start to put Marco Bezzecchi in that alien conversation, but is the Aprilia ready? I think all these guys, maybe it's unfair. Right now I'm going to call them baby aliens, and I'm saying Marc Marquez is the only true alien. And I think we all have to look back just a little bit and appreciate the Danny Pedrosa, Casey Stoner, Jorge Lorenzo, Valentino Rossi era of MotoGP, where all of those guys were so stinking good on a variety of motorcycles. Right now, I think we have one true alien. We have a few baby aliens. And if KTM and Yamaha and Aprilia can bring their bikes forward, maybe, who knows what we'll see in 2026 as far as a full grid of absolute alien beasts. That's what we're hoping for, right? That's what we're hoping for. But I do want to look further down the line at some unexpected results, because Brad Binder had a top 5 on that KTM. It has been few and far between for success for Brad. He's terrible in qualifying, coming through the grid, finishing 5th. Huge job for him. Really felt great for Brad. He's going to be fighting for his life in MotoGP next year. We know Pedro Acosta is going to be the priority for KTM to sign. Maybe they feel like they have to re-sign Brad in order to just have some stability over there. They don't want to look around and have both of their riders gone. But KTM is really going to be looking at Pedro Acosta as their first signing. And Brad is going to be fighting for his seat. He's had some success over there at KTM, but it has been too long. And I think if he can get to 2027, Brad is maybe one of those guys that can benefit from a tire swap. It seems like this Michelin tire no longer agrees with him. It's too grippy. He's not able to slide the bike the way he wants. It's also the characteristics of the bike itself, as they're burning through a little too much tire early. He's burning through too much tire and not able to bring it all the way to the end. But congrats to him anyway on a top 5. Fabio Quartararo holds that top 6. I mean, yes, he can qualify. He's going to qualify in the front row. Amazing one-lap speed, but we see in the races he falls back and back and back. And weirdly, a top 6 for Yamaha right now is a good weekend. That's a sad thing to say, because when we look over at the other Japanese manufacturer of Honda, a good weekend for them has been on the podium. That's where Yamaha needs to be. They need to be a good weekend. We're finishing at the front. We're finishing on the podium. But right now, a good weekend for them is him, starting on that front row and just holding a 6th place and keeping a few Ducatis and a couple KTMs and an Aprilia behind him. which was pretty tall order. I mean, he had guys harassing him the entire race, ends up in 6th place. Pretty good ride. It's going to feel underwhelming for the team. Yamaha does not want to be running around in 6th at a track they should be fairly strong at and do fairly well. I also want to shout out to Ayagura, who had a great weekend, 79 on the hat, finishes 7th place. Like I always say, this kid always finds a way to come through on Sunday. He may not qualify that well. I think he's still trying to figure that out. Does get himself into Q2 this week. Qualifies, what did he qualify? 12th. Not a great qualifying, but comes all the way forward to get that top 8 into 7th place. That's a pretty darn good weekend. 2nd Aprilia in front of his teammate who had a horrible crash and didn't really race, but not a bad little bit of momentum for I going into the final race and the final rounds and trying to help develop that bike moving forward. He's going to be a key piece of this Aprilia team, if he can stay healthy, if he can stay injury-free, and if he can adapt his riding style to the new tires. There's so many ifs, but he has a lot of potential. The guy's a really talented rider, one of my favorites, but congrats on the top 7 for him. And I can't step away from this Grand Prix without shouting out to Pol Espargaro at another top 10 on the KTM. I don't think all of you out there in internet land understand that a wild card rider is not supposed to be finishing in the top 10 and the top 5. And when we see these KTM guys in Danny Pedrosa and Pol Espargaro come out there, these guys are getting into Q2. They're in the top 10 in practice, and they're finishing in the top 10 in the Grand Prix. That is not normal. That is not normal for a test rider. They're supposed to be a little bit off the pace. They're testing a lot of things throughout a weekend. They're doing a lot of things that the other riders aren't doing. And on Sunday, their focus is all over the place and split, and they're rusty. They're not in race shape. They're not used to doing 24, 25 laps on that bike nonstop in race conditions, being barged and bumped by every other rider on the grid. 10th place is phenomenal. We heard the commentators talk about how Pol is loving his role with the Spanish media companies, being a media personality, but also being a test rider and not being a full-time rider. Doesn't really have the heart and the hunger to be a full-time rider. But when he's out there, I don't think there's a doubt in the world this guy still could compete at the highest level full-time if he really wanted to. I think we have to look at Pol Espargaro and say he may be one of those underrated talents in MotoGP. He always felt like he was just about there, knocking on the door of that win. No, Miquel Oliveira gets the win. Oh, just knocking on the door of that podium. He makes a mistake. Had some spats with Franco Morbidelli back in the day and things like that. So I think he's one of those guys that you look at and go, Pol Espargaro, yeah, whatever. But I think we kind of have to take our hats off to him and talk about how impressive him coming in as a wild card and consistently being the 10 fastest in practice, qualifying, and in race results. It's not an easy thing to do. All right, so I brought up Miquel Oliveira. I do want to shout out to Miguel. I think a lot of us forget because he's had such tough times lately. I mean, when he left KTM, coming over to Yamaha, hasn't had the best luck injury-wise. I mean, I was there a couple years ago when he got cleaned out by Marc Marquez at his home Grand Prix. He's had a rough time, some injuries, hasn't been fast of late. I think a lot of us forget that this guy is the most successful rider that KTM has ever had. 5 race wins in the category. That's a lot more than a ton of riders we all consider to be very, very good. Miquel Oliveira is a very, very good rider, and I think BMW in World Superbike is getting a top talent. Is he going to be able to match the fireworks that Toprak gave them at BMW? Who knows? But they are for sure getting someone who absolutely knows how to ride a motorcycle. So let's get into it. We brought up Superbike. Miquel Oliveira, we know he's basically doing a rider switch with Toprak. Toprak's coming to MotoGP. He'll be testing the V4 on Monday. When you all see this in Aragon, they're going to get him on that bike as soon as possible. Now that the World Superbike campaign is over, we know that Miquel Oliveira is going over to Superbike, and this weekend we had runner-up Nicolo Bulega riding for Ducati. Now, first of all, let's just talk about why. Why is MotoGP so focused on these Superbike guys coming over? Well, obviously Toprak, top talent, is undeniable. Like, he's a big star as well. He's a big draw. He needs to be in MotoGP. He wants to be in MotoGP. He wants to test himself up against the best. For Nicolo and Ducati, it's also interesting because MotoGP is going to Pirelli tires in 2027. Who is going to be testing those Pirelli tires on the MotoGP machine? You guessed it, Nicolo Bulega. Who's going to be testing it on the Yamaha machine? You guessed it, Toprak. And this is where their experience trumps the experience of the guys in the current paddock riding on the Michelins. These two manufacturers are going to use these guys as a baseline for these tests on these new Pirelli tires with the prototype bikes. These two combination of the prototype bike and the Pirelli tires, hasn't really been used. We don't know what we're going to see. We've seen it in Moto2 how it absolutely turned the category upside down. And I think both Yamaha and Ducati really want to see how Pirelli affects their project, especially Yamaha with that V4. They're changing the entire bike, but right now they're doing it on Michelins. And then they're going to change the entire bike, and they're going to have to go over to Pirelli's and make sure that bike still works, still gives them the grip that they've been so desperately needing for so freaking long. These guys are going to be instrumental in both these teams' programs going forward, developing that bike for 2027. So what do? They need to get Nicolo on the bike right now, get him up to speed on a MotoGP machine. He subs in for the injured Marc Marquez and doesn't do too bad. I mean, I think a lot of people were like going out of their mind on Friday when he finished in one of the practices kind of near above Pecco, and you're going, holy smokes, he's faster than Pecco already. He's faster than the former world champion. We know Pecco on Friday takes him time to build. Saturday we saw Nicolo crash out of the sprint, not wholly his fault, I think probably braking a little too hard, made a small mistake, the bike goes down. But on Sunday, 15th in the final results for Nicolo Bulega, gets a MotoGP World Championship point, which is nothing to sneeze at, especially for a first-time rider in this category. I think we have to take our hats off and say, wow, pretty stinking good. And I think when we look at Toprak, the expectations, especially since he's not on the Ducati, he's going to be on a Yamaha that's very new, fresh out the box, they'll still be developing. 15s, top 10s are going to be what they're aiming for. Top 10 would have been mind-blowing for Nicolo to get. Top 10s will be absolutely amazing for Toprak to do in his rookie year. Maybe he can come in and shake it up even more than that, but I think the expectations, that's where they lay. And so for Nicolo, finishing 15th on that Ducati, only 12 seconds off the nearest Ducati. I think he was 32 seconds off the race lead, 12 seconds off of Fabio Di Giannantonio ahead of him. So not all that far his first race weekend. We'll see how he does in Valencia, but I think for their testing program, if you look at his times, he's right there with Lorenzo Salvadori, and he's kind of like where you want to be as a test rider. So I think that's what Ducati's looking at, going, can this guy ride the bike fast enough to get us valuable data in testing? And the answer is yes. Now, finally, I want to talk about aero. A lot is made of aero in MotoGP. Some people say it's ruining the sport. Our sport will never be the same because of the wings on the front. These don't even look like motorcycles anymore, blah, blah, blah. I know a lot of you really hate the aero. I'm kind of indifferent on it. I'm all for technological advances in motorcycling. How else are you supposed to get more front-end downforce? We were going to go to aero. It was always going to happen. And I don't buy the, well, these don't look like motorcycles anymore. F1 cars don't look like cars either. This is a prototype sport. These things are going to look a little freaky. And for the purists out there, I know that's hard to hear, but that's just the facts. But I will give you one reason that you can absolutely hate on the aero packages, and it's what we saw this weekend with pieces of the motorcycle flying off during races. We saw it happen to Enea Bastianini, which forced him to basically pull in and get a whole new front end of the bike. We saw it happen to the rear aero on Brad Binder's bike. We've seen it over and over again with Marc Marquez having the front wing of the motorcycle ripped off and then him have it to basically wrangle that bike around the track with one leg. How much does a missing wing affect the aerodynamics of the motorcycle? A lot. If you're expecting that downforce in the corner and to help you turn and to put weight on that front wheel and all of a sudden you don't have it, you have to be so much more careful on the brakes, so much more precise with your braking markers. And now the wind is going over the bike unevenly. It could pull you off to the side of the track. There's so much that can go wrong. But this is my biggest gripe with the aero, is the fact that when these riders come together, the pieces go flying. I think it's not only dangerous for the riders who are riding behind with debris on the track and all that stuff. We see it over and over again. Plastic pieces left all over the track from these aero packages. Also, it's a mess. Like, we want to see bar banging racing without the bikes falling apart and then having to pull into pit lane to get a new one. That doesn't help anybody. And the fact that Brad Binder was missing that rear aero, does that affect him? He finishes 5th. Could he have moved further up the grid if not for that damage to his motorcycle? So I think the movement to make the aero smaller, I think we're also going to start seeing a restriction in these back aero pieces. Aprilia's got wings all over this stinking thing. I can't remember if it was Marco Bezzecchi or Jorge Martin not too long ago, crashed, really simple low side crash, and it looked like that aero wing almost hooked their boot and was going to drag them into the bike. So I mean, I think it's going to be safety concerns going on. So there I'll agree with you. There's the part where that's the thing about the aero we should be talking about. The reason I hate the aero is I don't want to see pieces of the motorcycle flying all over the track, having these guys come together and suddenly the bike is unrideable. Like, that's my gripe to Formula One cars. It feels like as soon as they run over a bump, the car doesn't work anymore. I don't want to see the motorcycles do the same thing. So if you want to gripe about aero, there's a good reason to. The aesthetics, it's ruining the sport, save it for someone else. I'm not there with you. But the pieces flying all over the track, I'm not a big fan of. Hopefully the smaller aero in 2027 will help that just a little bit. And then they can rein in some of these weird pieces that, what on earth are you doing on the side of that bike, Aprilia and KTM and all of you? Anyway, thank you so much for watching Monday Morning MotoGP. Make sure you check out the podcast tomorrow on I Told You So Tuesday, where we go through my pre-race predictions and see how good or bad I actually did. Thank you so much for watching.